Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show, and here's Eddie.
Hi.
So Eddie's joining me today to talk about how to be salt-free in Commander. Yes, no sodium Commander-ish, right?
It's possible.
It is possible. So Eddie, if you don't recognize him, he's been on a lot of episodes on Commander's Quarters. Well, I guess a lot's like a couple, more than anyone else, I believe. Check the stats. But yeah, so he's been on a couple of podcast episodes about the Commander's rule changes, about banning cards or unbanning cards, and he may or may not have already been on a potential gameplay episode that will or not be coming out at some point, maybe?
2025, is that
2025, I believe. So it depends on when this episode gets edited and actually goes out as to when that would have been true, me saying or not. Regardless, that's not why we're here today. Again, we're talking about salt in Commander. So, Eddie, what exactly is salt?
So salt is simply getting upset or a little bit bitter, a little tilted when something isn't going your way in a game. It's just shorthand that has been pretty widely adopted in the Commander scene.
Yeah, I think it's many people know exactly what it is, kind of, or know it's kind of what it is. Like if you go on EDH Rec, I think they have like a top salt score or whatnot for certain cards, like Armageddon, like is at the top of that list because it makes people salty.
It does.
So yeah, I mean, what when it comes to salt in a game, though, what's, has it been something that you've experienced before?
I think it's a pretty unanimous experience that everyone's experienced both themselves and seen across the table. So I thought it would be an interesting topic for us to delve a little deeper, talk about like what makes people salty, how it differs between people, how to maybe approach it from a different lens and either overcome it and like not get salty about that particular topic anymore, or just have a little discussion about it.
Yeah, Commander's a social game, having discussions is what actually makes Commander work.
It is.
It's a broken format where you can do broken things, and the reason it works is because of talking. Figure.
And especially in Commander that you mention it, like in your 1v1 games, it's not impossible, but it's a little bit tougher to get salty because everything your opponent plays is in the interest of setting them ahead or slowing you down.
Yep.
In Commander, we introduced the social dynamic, which is awesome, but also has that byproduct of making it a little bit easier for you to disadvantage one person more than another one, which can lead to
playing
salt.
Favorites, kind of essentially. Okay, is there any specific time that you've been salty in a game?
Yeah, there's been a few. One that came to my mind first, and we'll talk about the different things that make people salty later in more detail, but this one was due to the type of deck I was playing.
Okay.
I was playing my Phoenix Mill deck. And
everyone knows that Mill is the most powerful deck in Commander, so that's probably why they were salty, right?
Yeah, it was all threat assessment. No, some people just really hate Mill, and I really loved building the deck. I liked piloting it, but I was getting a lot of people, and not everyone. Some people were all aboard the Mill train, especially graveyard players.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a lot of people that get really salty when they start seeing their favorite cards hitting the bin.
Yep.
And as the Phoenix player, I got a little salty because I was feeling arbitrarily targeted due to the type of deck that I was playing.
Sure. It's not like you were playing stacks or, some kind of a deck that was, preventing players from playing. It's just that you were kind of not playing by the, maybe not rule set, I guess, that they expect, but people expect to die from combat damage generally, and you were not about that.
No, I was trying to do the Herculean task of milling 300 other cards.
Only 5 times harder than standard.
And anyway, we'll talk about how I eventually kind of came to terms and addressed that later on in the episode. But that was definitely one experience that was kind of eye-opening, and like I could feel myself getting a little upset at how much Phoenix got targeted. How about you?
I think the one that immediately comes to mind was basically I made a deal, and the deal was broken, not by me, by the other player, essentially. I cast Aether Gale, I believe, which bounces 6 target non-land permanents back to the owner's hands. And so I was going about choosing my targets, and one of the players says, hey, if you bounce my Meteor Golem back to my hand, I will not target any of your things. I will target one of your opponent's things, or one of our opponent's things, so it can help us both out. And I say, oh, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Okay, I'll do that. So I bounce the Meteor Golem back to the hand, and then at a certain point, I was ahead, and it became oh, well, I'm playing my Meteor Golem now, and I'm destroying your non-land permanent right there.
Ouch.
Which, I mean, yes, I was ahead. Yes, I was probably about to win. But, in my opinion, a deal is a deal. Even if, it's not a good deal later on in the game, you still got to abide by that deal. And so, yes, I got a little salty about that. Now, I didn't address it directly at the time, or maybe I haven't even addressed it all. Maybe I'm just keeping it pent up in, just keeping it in here. But this is the time to let it out, That passive-aggressive Minnesota place has to kind of move forward.
Yeah, it reminds me of a John Mulaney bit on how you just store all of your bad feelings inside of you, and then one day you die. Don't ever address them.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what you should be doing. But
that is how you remain salt-free in Commander.
That's it. Okay, so I guess let's identify kind of, you've got a couple things written down here. Yeah. Let's identify what exactly makes players salty in Commander. We've kind of mentioned a few just overall, but if we have to bullet point them, which I believe you have here.
I have.
Let's go through those.
Yeah, so there's way more than we can list in one episode, but I think here's some heavy hitters that might drive the salt level up in people more often than others. First one I have is just losing.
Yeah.
A lot of people play to win.
Yeah.
Some people don't, but I would say predominantly we're playing with the goal of winning, and just the simple fact of losing or getting behind in a game can make someone salty.
And that's kind of unfortunate because, when you are playing a game of Commander, you've got, like a 25% chance of winning, essentially.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get salty 75% of the time, might not be the best.
Yeah, it might not be the best experience for you.
Best. All right, what's next?
The next one is one that I've seen a lot of times at tables where someone gets a little hot under the collar because they see someone make a play that they think demonstrates bad threat assessment.
Sure.
They see one person who's really stopping them, and then player 3 over here removes something completely unrelated to that, and they're like, why did you remove that thing when you could remove this thing over there?
Especially when it's your own thing, I guess, that's being removed instead of the perceived threat. Okay, that makes sense. All right, what next?
One that I talked about earlier, my Phoenix was a mill deck. That can make some people a little salty. There's plenty of deck archetypes that really get people upset. The first one I'll mention is one that I think you aren't a huge fan of, and that's Chaos decks.
Chaos decks, not everyone dislikes them, but I am definitely in the camp that's like, please tell me ahead of time if you're going to play that.
Yeah, absolutely. Some other common offenders are combo decks, a lot of CEDH decks, competitive EDH decks. Stacks, which is just the whole archetype where you're trying to slow down the whole table, but you're gaining, hopefully, incremental advantage to be able to win, but it ends up just slowing the whole table down. And then another one is theft decks. There's not as many of these, but where they try to steal your stuff and use it against you.
Yeah, so like my Kaiga deck that I built quite a while ago where you're just trying to steal everyone's creatures, some people might not appreciate all their creatures getting stolen and then getting smacked in the face with their own creatures.
No, for some reason, I don't think that's a very popular strategy.
Yeah, probably not. One thing really quick I wanted to mention, though, is that kind of with the combo and stacks decks, like if they are being played kind of in a CDH meta or with other CDH players, that's kind of an expectation, that kind of anything goes, right? So
yeah, CEDH players on the whole sit down at a table without any of the concept that there won't be counterspells, there won't be land destruction. Everyone's playing optimally. It's more of a game to outplay everyone else and win as fast as possible.
Yeah, you're doing some of the most powerful things, but everyone else is doing the most powerful things as well. So it's kind of an expectation versus, let's say you take, the most powerful combo decks and you play it at a casual table, then that could cause some saltiness. If everyone shuffles up 100 cards and then on turn 2 you're like, okay, I win. You're like, but I was playing my Feldergriff deck and this takes at least 8 turns to win. So
that's a good point to make. I think overall competitive tables, at least for the purposes of deck builds, actually probably have less salt than most casual tables. So,
that's probably true. I mean, obviously we cannot verify that fact, but we will verify it right here. This is true, 100%
absolutely true.
100%. Okay, next up, what we got?
So the next one is completely separate from deck construction, gameplay, that sort of thing. It's more of just a byproduct of social interaction, and that some people are just rude. They might not be having the best day, and they just make comments that might get under your skin a little bit.
Yeah, that can definitely be. definitely be something. I've definitely run into my fair share of rude people in the world. You are not one of them, typically.
Typically, I try not to be, and I also adhere to every deal I've made.
Yeah. So the last one is broken deals, and I kind of mentioned that before, basically, where if you make a deal in Commander, there is no kind of like you don't lose the game for breaking a deal. I mean, I guess unless your group kind of has that kind of rule, but there is no rule that says you can't break deals. It's kind of in one of those unwritten rules that if you make a deal, you keep it no matter what.
Yeah. And some people, for this reason, really hate the idea of deals in general, and they might just not make any deals or choose to opt out of deals because they can see that this happens. Sometimes it works out in their favor, just the way that they, sign on the dotted line, and other times
you didn't read the fine print.
You did not read the fine print.
Yeah, I said I won't attack you with this. Is it 2 turns? Is it forever? Is it? You need to make sure that you're kind of being specific with your deals. And there are definitely times when you might make a bad deal, and that's okay.
Yeah, and sometimes deals do work out for both people, and everyone walks away happy that they made the deal. But people also have cards in your hand that you don't know about, and so maybe the deal that you're making won't pan out the way that you thought.
Yep.
Yeah, so sometimes the deal that you make, you just got to honor it, even though it might not exactly work out the way that you intended when you made it.
Yeah, I mean, you signed, to get the rug out, you get the rug pulled out from underneath you sometimes, but you learn from that, and then you go for it.
Yeah.
So, salt-free.
Salt-free, yeah. So those are some of the common reasons that Commander players can get salty. I think what would be useful next is to kind of address some of those specifically and talk about just approaches to the game that can help you be salt-free and kind of have a more fun experience.
Is a completely sodium-free Commander possible?
I think it is possible. It's definitely not going to happen all of the time. And the more you play with a certain group of people, the more you're just going to, be friendly with each other and understand their play styles. And it generally just gets to be a better and better experience. But, everyone has a bad day. It's going to happen. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how you approach it next time.
And kind of realizing kind of maybe when you are getting a little salty and kind of, keeping yourself in check is good too. So the first thing you've written here is accept that Commander is high variance. So basically, Commander is a wide variety of things are going to happen in a game. You might think that you've got the optimal strategy, but you're playing against a deck that really counters your strategy. Or maybe someone top decks the right card, and they win from there. As a 100-card, singleton format, a lot of weird things are going to happen.
Yeah, they are. You can spend weeks fine-tuning, including every applicable tutor to your deck, ramp everything, do all the right stuff. Sit down, shuffle up, play, and nothing will go right.
Well, and sometimes even with the shuffling, that goes wrong too. You go, you shuffle up your deck, you draw 7 cards, and you've got 5 lands. Or the next time you shuffle up, you got 1 land. And you keep mulling and mulling and mulling, and maybe you even getting salty from there just because of the variance of the actual game.
Yeah. So this one, it's not so much that you can avoid getting bad draws or bad hands like that. It's just understanding that if you are struggling in a game because your hand didn't work out, you're missing your land drops, that's not necessarily your fault. Even the most consistent decks in the format are going to have bad games, and just to kind of accept that as part and parcel of the format will go a long way to having you just shuffle up, play the next time. It'll average out over time.
Well, it's kind of actually one of the draws to the format for many people is that variance. The exciting things can happen, and we can actually kind of have sometimes these, cruiser battleship metas in games because it's not as consistent as other formats where, if you're not, catching up to everyone else on turn 4, you lose. You can definitely kind of have longer games because of that variance.
Yeah. The low lows of getting the bad end of the variance is also balanced out by the high end. Like you can get these epic plays that happen nowhere else.
Yep. So, I mean, you might have, nothing in your hand and you're very slow kind of opening, and your friend might have, Soul Ring Signet, and then you're, they're off to the races, and, that happens sometimes.
Yeah. Let's skip one here because I think what you just mentioned is applicable to what you just said.
But it's on the sheet.
It is on the sheet.
Okay, we'll skip.
Great. So you mentioned if someone gets an awesome turn 1 Soul Ring Signet, they're off to the races. You can turn your salt into politics. So if you're getting a little jealous of what Alec has going on across the table, you can say, "Hey, buddy, we're not doing quite as well as that. So why don't we lay off each other for X amount of time and focus on the threat at the table?" So rather than succumbing to the salt and just being bummed that you didn't top deck your Soul Ring, Yeah, just make it part of the game.
Sure,
and you've got the numbers advantage on your side. Yeah, they might have a little bit of a mana advantage, but you're drawing 2 cards between the 2 of you.
That's true.
To that person's
Playing
one.
2 lands to 1 and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're kind of utilizing your salt and someone else's potential salt for good.
Yeah.
So
You're turning your salt into fuel.
Beat 1 is what this is.
Exactly. 2 lefts make a right. So going back to number 2, which is a little bit different, goes back to one of the reasons that we get salty in the first place, and that's when we think someone made a bad play.
Yep.
If we think someone has just poor threat assessment, they did not read the board correctly, and you knew what should have happened, and you get upset. Because
obviously, you know what's best, right?
Yeah.
You are playing this game. You are the number 1 player, and you should be right every single time.
Yes, you're the hero of the story.
Exactly.
Every time.
Exactly. You are, the main character of the book.
Yes.
You have to win.
So one way that I like to address this when I think someone has poor threat assessment is just kind of assess the board. Maybe they have 5 cards in hand and I have no idea what those are. They probably have an answer. I've been in that position where someone's like, Eddie, why in the world did you make that play? Meanwhile, I'm holding an utter end, which removes anything in my hand, and I'm ready to answer the next threat.
Yeah.
And so the other thing is, playgroups just do have different skill levels. I've been playing for a decade. I like to think that I know most of what's going on, but there's definitely cards I don't know. And there's, for newer players, even just the multiplayer dynamic might be different to them. And if they did have poor threat assessment, that's not necessarily a reason to get salty.
No.
It's also not a reason to condescend and say oh, you should have done this. It's just hey, in the future, this card is scary because it can do this thing on this board. So just try to be a helpful force in the pod and just, maybe just say oh, this is really scary and point that out and let them decide if that's what they want to use their removal on.
So more like an educational kind of moment where you're, maybe teaching a new player, potential, better threat assessment for a future, game that they play potentially.
Exactly. Yeah, there's always going to be another game.
Okay, so moving on to the next one is kind of changing your own perspective. So you're saying, maybe you're not, your deck's not doing its thing. Maybe you're not having fun with that, but your friend's deck is kind of going off and, doing their thing. If you kind of look at from their perspective and see kind of what they're doing, you can be happy, for your friend and their deck kind of, doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. I mean, Magic is a pretty communal format, and I know people come to me and oh, could you look at this deck, see what you think is good, what it's bad, look for improvements. Or even after the game, how did my deck do?
Yeah.
And if you kind of make it part of your experience, if maybe you missed some land drops, you didn't get the Soul Ring Signet, but your friend's deck is just humming and it's doing its thing, be happy for them. Just be cheer them on a little bit. Yeah, they're going to be using it against you, but it's still pretty sweet to see some of the crazy shenanigans that can happen in Commander, even if it's not your deck that's doing it.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is everyone should be happy when I pull up my Joyra Artifact Storm deck and I take a 30-minute turn because it's doing its thing.
Well, it would actually be a 5-second turn because I'd be playing Rajmi and counter your stuff, and then you'd be done.
Moving on. What's the next point?
All right. So this one is a little bit personal to me, and that's maybe if you're playing against a deck that you think is a little more unfun than it should be, it's not healthy for your meta, your play group. Maybe your friend just doesn't understand why their deck is unfun. For your Joyra Storm deck, you love the deck, you love playing it. I'm happy to let you play it, and it's great fun. But some people might not appreciate that, and I think it can be educational to just say, here's my deck, why don't you play it?
Yep.
And just kind of see how it operates. This can accomplish a couple things. Number one, you might see oh, that card's not really doing what I want it to. You might be able to tune your deck. And number two, you can say, oh, that's not very fun to play against. I'm not having a good time playing against my own deck. And that's what kind of clicked for me with Phoenix, because I gave someone my Phoenix deck. And I kind of knew this in the back of my head. But seeing all of my favorite cards in my other deck hit the graveyard, never having cast them, in my head, I knew that I'm not losing card advantage. They're not making me discard these cards. I'm just as able to play the game.
They're just gone.
But seeing all these cards that I thoughtfully put in the deck disappear was kind of a bummer. And so that really helped it click in my head for why Phoenix, sometimes drew that
Sure.
reaction from other people, and they got a little salty.
Well, that doesn't mean you can ever play that deck, but it kind of means that, you might have a conversation ahead of time, kind of with whenever I play Joyra, which is very rare, but I basically I'll say like, okay, maybe that's the end of the night and like, okay, let's just all pull out our most competitive decks, that are just going to go off and do crazy things that are really powerful. Then maybe that's the time that you could pull out your deck if you say, hey, is everyone okay with my Phoenix Mill deck? Is everyone okay with this? And then you play from there. But yeah, kind of just maybe if you know that some people don't like it, not pulling it out might be the better choice.
Yeah, exactly. So you just kind of feel the room a little bit, and if you know like someone's just adamantly against Mill, you either are prepared for them to hit you in the face a lot and not be salty about it.
Starting on turn 1.
Exactly. Or just put the deck back in the bag and grab another one.
Yeah, maybe try something else.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the next point, actually, I think we kind of talked about earlier. Basically, in a multiplayer, in a 4-player game, percentage chance is you're going to win 25% of the time. I mean, if you're on the play, I guess if you start, then maybe 27 or 6 or whatever the math is.
It's pretty even, though.
It's very even, essentially. You're not going to win more times than you lose in Commander. That's just a fact.
It's mostly a fact. I think I want to elaborate that one a little bit, because this one's been really struck a nerve in me, too, because it's really easy for playgroups to end up kind of getting in an arms race, and you're like, oh, I feel like I'm losing a lot.
Yep.
So I'm gonna, spend a little bit more money here, upgrade this card there.
Buy mana crypts for all.
Buy mana crypts for every deck.
Duels, alpha duels.
Yeah, all of those.
Yep. Put a car payment down on your deck, pretty much, essentially.
Yeah, and lo and behold, your deck win percentage will generally go up, and that feels good. I think for me, it felt like if I wasn't winning half the time, like that was a bad thing. But I was kind of in the mindset of like most other games, like chess or Standard and Magic or whatever, where like, 50-50 seems about right. But if you take a step back and think about it, if you're all playing equally powerful decks, it should be about 25%.
Yeah.
I would go so far as to say, like, if you're, and granted, there's some pilot skill that, if you're playing the deck really well, you can wiggle those numbers around a little bit.
Yep.
But I think of it from the perspective of if my deck win percentage goes beyond 25%, again, a couple percentage points here and there isn't that big of a deal. But if you're winning 50% of your games that you play with that deck, you're probably underestimating its power level, and you're kind of bringing too big of a gun to the fight.
Sure.
And it has the downstream impact of the other 3 players have to split 50% of the games that you aren't winning amongst themselves. So they're only winning 17-ish% of the time.
Math checks out.
Great. And if you put yourself in their shoes, if you only won 17% of the time, not even 25%, but if you were only winning less than a fifth of your games, that feels bad. If you're trying to make your deck so much more powerful than everyone else in the playgroup that you're winning more than 25% by a large margin, you're also actively making your friends lose way more than they reasonably should.
Well, sure, and it can even kind of turn on its head too. That actually, they could actually make you even more salty about this game. That if, like, let's say you get your 50% win percentage over a consistent amount of time, they could be like, okay, well, Eddie's playing with us, so he's always the threat to start off with, no matter what anyone else is playing, and everyone targets you from the get-go, and that might bring your win percentage down to a more reasonable level. But then you might be getting salty every single game because why are you always targeting me? Why are you always targeting me? But not kind of realizing maybe the arms race that you created and kind of took over, and then maybe why that kind of reaction happens.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of ways you can address this particular aspect of getting salty. Number one, you can kind of realize that your deck isn't really fit for the board out there. I know I try to give myself pretty creative like deck limitations, like I'm only using commons and uncommons, or like budget restrictions, or not that you can't build a powerful deck on a budget.
Oh, thank you.
But other things like maybe I'm gonna only play from certain sets, or like really adhere to a theme. So like if you kind of give yourself some self limitations when you're building a deck and have really fun playing it, but also you're not overdoing it on the power creep thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, next up you've got being disappointed is fine and healthy. Being angry or rude is not. Can you explain that one?
I don't think we need to go too much further than that.
No, I think that's not self-explanatory at all. That makes no sense.
Yeah. But yeah, just be a pretty good person about it. If we're playing to win, that's fine.
Yeah.
You can be disappointed that your deck didn't win. That's fine. Just don't make the other person who won feel bad about winning. I think that's one of the more rude things you can do in a game.
And you wouldn't want your friend to do the same to you if you won. So
Yeah. A little bit of empathy goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this one's one that I've seen other people do, and I've started to do myself. And that's if you are feeling disappointed after losing, rather than focusing on the loss, like hand your deck to your friend and say, "Here's my deck. Do you see any weak links? Do you see anything I could improve?
What could be improved?" Yeah.
When we played the game, do you think I made any misplays, or was your deck really just doing its thing? Like, just get some feedback and kind of use it as a learning opportunity rather than kind of wallowing in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, kind of continuing to learn. You might not have all the answers, and your friend might, but together maybe you've got more answers than not. That doesn't make any sense. Ignore that part. Anyways, the last part you've got kind of owning up to being salty and apologizing. Basically, that if everyone's gonna get salty. Like every single Magic player, you could be the most zen person of all time, and you are going to get salty at some point on something happening in a game of Commander.
Yeah.
I guess I can't guarantee that, but I would assume that probably happens to everyone.
If you are the exception that has never been upset in your life,
please comment below.
Yeah, let
like
us know. You can be on the next installment of the Salt-Free episode.
So many comments on that. Like, I've never been salty.
Yeah. But yeah, it's again just kind of being a good human being. Like, rather than letting a confrontation kind of linger as an open wound.
Yeah.
Especially if you're gonna if it's part of someone in your playgroup or at your store that you're gonna see time and time again, and not that you shouldn't be nice to random strangers either.
Yeah.
But it can carry over from game to game and really just kind of get worse and worse. Just kind of owning up and saying, "Sorry, man. Like, I just really like my Phoenix deck. I felt a little bit salty that I got targeted.
Yeah.
That was my bad. Let's shuffle up and play."
Yeah,
again.
holding a grudge kind of from game to game, or be like, you did this 2 years to me, so therefore I'm still gonna go after you first, kind of thing.
Roy, I remember the deal that you broke in January of 2019. I still remember.
Never again. Never again. All right, so Eddie, the last kind of section we've got here is what can't we change? So what are things that we can't change?
So I'm a pretty positive guy. Like, we just talked for a while about things that you can change, whether it's your attitude or helping out other people. But there's some things that it's just maybe not possible to avoid a little salt.
Yeah.
The first one, I'll be entirely honest, is you can't always change other people. Some jerks are just gonna be jerks.
Yeah, and that'll happen. I feel like, when it comes to kind of playing in your play group, you can kind of, determine kind of, who's all going to be in your play group. You can have discussions like that. It's kind of a more social thing potentially than kind of, if you just randomly go to an LGS, you can't expect that everyone's going to be on the exact same level of, mutual respect potentially that is on your playgroup at home.
Yeah. I mean, there's just all sorts of different people in the world. Not everyone's going to see eye to eye.
Yep.
And this one's kind of tough, especially if you're in a smaller town and you only have a limited pool of people to play with. It can be tough. In larger areas, you can be like, well, I just won't play with that person again.
Yep.
Problem solved. But this one can be tough, and sometimes it's hard to come to the terms that maybe this person just isn't right for the play group, or you're not right for their play group, or whatever it happens to be.
Yep, just happens to happen. If someone is so salty that they can't have a conversation about it, then let it go. That's the next one you said.
Yeah, I mean, this one doesn't happen too often. This is when the salt levels are at maximum.
Maximum salt,
maximum
100%
salt
sodium.
Yeah. And if someone's so salty that they just want to pick up their cards and go, or you just want to pick up your cards and go, sometimes that's the right thing. Just don't try to solve every problem. Sometimes when emotions are running high, just let it go, walk away.
Yep.
When everyone's calmer about it, you can go back and have a conversation if you want to, and kind of sort it out at that point. But this is just kind of a person-to-person relationship thing. You just need to sometimes let the emotions
let the salt levels decrease before kind of getting back into the conversation. The last one, actually, it's outside circumstances. So, I mean, Magic is, at the end of the day, a game. Right? You're getting salty about cardboard. You're getting salty about interactions that you have because of cardboard. Kind of funny.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I mean, people put a lot of time and effort into Commander, and that's why we sometimes get salty about it, because we've invested a lot into it. But yeah, like I mentioned here, we're just more than the game. We've got outside life circumstances that sometimes can carry over into the games, even if we try to not let them do that, but they sometimes do. And sometimes that jerk that's just being a jerk has just had a bad day. And they aren't normally a jerk, but they're just, something bad happened to them, and they're just not having a great day.
Completely out of your control. And
you
don't know about, and everyone's got their own life circumstances.
Yeah, and you can't fix everything. So I mean, sometimes you just got to be that's life.
Unless you've got counter spells, then you can fix everything, right?
Yeah. I counter your salt. No.
Okay, so Eddie's actually got a really nicely written closing statement, so I'm going to let him handle this.
Sure. Basically, I just wrote down that commander can mean different things to different people, but at the end of the day, we're all just trying to have a good game, have a fun time, even when you're trying to win. And so I think the reason I really wanted to make this episode is that going salt-free, or at least a little reduced sodium, can make the game more fun for both you and your opponents. And sometimes there's just, life is complicated and a bummer, and Commander's kind of a little bit of a break from all of that. So we should at least be able to have fun here.
Yep.
And I just really wanted some of these tips that I've found to be useful. Maybe one or two of them will stick along with you, and you'll just have a better game because of it.
I think this is all a lie. That's not exactly what you want at all. You really just wanted an episode that, when you're playing at like a Magic Fest with someone and they're being salty, you can just like point them to this episode and be like, this is what I said about this. Okay?
Yes,
watch this, educate yourself.
Yes, here you go.
Oh, just kidding. Okay. So I think that's all the time we've got for today, though. So in the comments below, let us know. Well, actually, if you've never been salty before, because we already mentioned that.
Yeah, I would really like to know.
I'd like to hear about all the people who've never been salty before. But how do you, all the people who have been salty at some point before, how do you stay salt-free? How have you kind of realized maybe a time that you were salty about something and maybe, kind of realized that and then kind of made adjustments from there?
Yeah, that'd be, and the more comments we have like that, maybe someone else will read through and be like, yep, that was me. I was that person, and take it on to the next game. Or
maybe all the comments are just going to be, I've never been salty.
Maybe, we'll find out.
Should have mentioned that. Anyways, thanks again for joining me, Eddie.
Yeah, you got it.
And as always, thanks again and have a good one.